1 week it was the wrong way. I think it needs to be horizontal.
Yeah.
Do you need a reading? Do you want to come get a reading, paper? Oh wait, there's one behind you. You see it? Good. Problem solved. And we got drinks too. Did you? Oh, you got a drink. Okay. Are we live now?
Yeah. 2 people are watching.
2 people are watching. Yay!
I don't think, however, you can, if you turn
Yeah, it's definitely my mom and probably my friend Rowena.
record,
But
if I'm like, if it's like the other way. I don't know my senses of direction. But
do you know anyone who would know?
like it won't. If you turn it the other way, it just doesn't want to like work. When
I think it's locked on the position. You
Book and live. Okay.
All right, I'm going to give you your space.
It just keeps saying like it won't record if it's repeated though.
Okay, well then we'll just go with what we got. Thank you.
Do you want to stand over there?
I'm going to stand right here and talk this way. Can you put it in the little?
I mean, this is usually meant for it to be like this.
Yeah.
I'm fine holding it.
You don't mind? Okay, great. That'd be lovely. You can sit down. There you go. Okay.
Get my reading to
I know. And you don't have to keep it on me. I'd be just as happy if nobody saw me at all.
Well, you kind of leave this.
Well, I've got my mic on. I've got this microphone on. Well, welcome to every week is a new adventure with this vintage situation with 5 groups of 5. So we have a group of 5, a group of 2. I'm here to talk to all of you at the same time. Ellie's having a picnic in the lower garden, so you do your thing, and it's all good. So we're going to take a minute as the hopefully as the yard work wraps up or not, to just take 2 minutes to breathe, to arrive in this beautiful space today in the sunshine, and be aware of God's presence here among us. It's such a privilege and a delight to be together in human bodies together right now. We're on Facebook Live too for people, especially my mom, for people who are far away or who are quarantined in dorms or wherever. So as you come, you're welcome here. So let's just take 2 minutes of silence together. Amen. Well, we're talking these days about resilience. It's kind of a buzzword, but to take these experience of challenge and uncertainty and adversity as opportunities for growth I mean, it's certainly an opportunity for stress and anxiety, and we all feel that. But even with that experience, to ask the question, how can we grow in resilience? How can we actually bend without breaking? And how have we seen people who've come before us live lives of resilience? What is the key to their own flexibility and growth? So each week we're reading from different Christians from the tradition, the vintage people, as I call them. And today I'm going to tell you the story of Mary Paik Lee. And I know you can't hear that well. Hopefully it's going to get quieter. But have any of you heard of her? Maybe, Ava? I've read her before, but she was born in 1900. She was born in Korea. And her parents were Christians, and there were very few Christians at the time. And when the American missionaries came to Korea, her father and mother actually welcomed them, supported them, taught them Korean, taught them the script of this very simple Korean script. And they translated the Bible and wrote the Bible. And so the missionaries advanced this work of literacy among people and to read for the purposes of reading the Bible. But it was also this whole new opening into education for many, many impoverished Korean people. And for women, Christianity became a real opportunity for growth because the women would take Bibles out into the villages, teach people to read, give them Bibles, and they, for the first time, could kind of leave the confines of home to go out into the world as women. So it was a really cool and exciting time in Korea. Also, around the arrival of the fostering of Christianity, there was a movement toward liberation in Korea. And Korea was declared its independence or freedom in 1919. Anyway, Mary was part of all this. But in 1905, her family left. The Japanese were invading, and what followed was a war and much hardship. Her family left to go to Hawaii to work. Her father took a job at a pineapple plantation, and it was grueling work. We're going to read about that. And then they moved to California. She lived to be 95 years old. So in 1990, she wrote this book called Quiet Odyssey, A Pioneer Korean Woman in America. So we're going to read some words of hers. And as we read these different little stories from her book, we're going to ask ourselves the question, how is her spiritual perspective, how is her faith associated with her resilience? What is it about her belief about God and the universe that helps her interpret her experience and survive and grow out of it? So that's kind of what we're going to be curious about, okay? And Ginger, is she licking your lettuce? She's really hopeful, but anyway. All right. So, what we're going to do is I'm going to read a little section, and then we're going to pause and ask a question and just talk about it. Okay, you ready? All right, let's begin. This is the first reading. And you have it so you can read along. I don't have to scream. This is number 1. Mother told me that there had been a lot of discussion for several days before the final decision was made for my parents, my brother, and me to leave Korea to find a better life elsewhere. Father was reluctant to leave, but his parents insisted, saying that his presence would not help them. They knew what would happen to them in the near future. They were prepared to face great hardship or worse, but they wanted at least one member of their family to survive and to live a better life somewhere else. Such strong, quiet courage in ordinary people. You can move your chair. You could go back. Or whatever you need to do. Sorry. The smoke, right. Such strong, quiet courage in ordinary people in the face of danger is really something to admire and remember always. My second brother, Pak Dao-sun, was born on October 6, 1905 in Hawaii. Father was desperate, always writing to friends in other places, trying to find a better place to live. Finally, he heard from friends in Riverside, California, who urged him to join them. They said the prospects for the future were better in America, that a man's wages were 10 to 15 cents an hour for 10 hours of work a day. After his year in Hawaii was up, Father borrowed enough money from friends to pay for our passage to America on board the SS China. We landed in San Francisco on December 3rd, 1906. As we walked down the gangplank, a group of young white men were standing around waiting to see what kind of creatures were disembarking. We must have been a very queer-looking group. They laughed at us and spit in our faces. One man kicked up Mother's skirt and called us names we couldn't understand. Of course, their actions and attitudes left no doubt about their feelings toward us. I was so upset. I asked Father why he had come to a place where we were not wanted. He replied that we deserved what we got because that was the same kind of treatment that Koreans had given to the first American missionaries in Korea. The children had thrown rocks at them, calling them white devils because of their blue eyes and yellow or red hair. He explained that anything new and strange causes some fear at first, so ridicule and violence often result. He said the missionaries just lowered their heads and paid no attention to their tormentors. They showed by their action and good works that they were just as good as, or even better, than those who laughed at them. He said that is exactly what we must try to do here in America. Study hard and learn to show Americans that we are just as good as they are. That was my first lesson in living, and I've never forgotten it. So let's take a moment. I've listed some questions on the back of the reading. And for this first reading, the question is this. Back in Korea, of course, remember Mary's father had helped the missionaries, the American missionaries, taught them to read and supported their work. How do you think his past experience with the missionaries and with his Christian faith informs his experience and interpretation of what's happening when they get to San Francisco? What do you notice about this story? So you guys talk to each other, if you would, anything, or you could talk about whatever you want. And I'll ring the bell in like 2 minutes, okay? And you guys, what do you talk, we'll talk together. You can just hold that, about what you're noticing in the story. I'll come over with your group. Yeah, sure. What did you notice in this story while I was screaming it at you?
I don't know what the word for it was, but it was a very good response that he didn't like immediately go to anger.
Yeah, he
but
didn't.
Instead, he went to empathy and understanding.
He went to empathy and understanding. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's interesting. He said, right, he explained that anything new and strange causes fear. Like, just like kind of amazing, right? But she's only 6 years old. Like, what would you say to your daughter if you were the father in that situation?
Sometimes bad things happen to good people.
Bad things happen to good people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I certainly, I mean, it's not an experience I can super imagine, but I don't think I would try to normalize it.
Yeah. So he's kind of normalizing it happened to them, and he even says like, kind of we deserved it, like we're just getting what the missionaries got.
Yeah.
So what's an alternative response?
I think it really depends because when you like understand like what immigrants have gone through, then like I feel like they have come to expect it. When it comes to like assimilating towards like a new society, they understand that they're going to be met with some like opposition. But if you like were not to, like if that wasn't your thought process coming in, then you would like maybe immediately go to anger and frustration. which is a valid emotion to have,
Yeah.
but may not help your situation.
Mm.
Like you can be angry, but then, like, what would that do for you? Versus like leaning into your empathy and understanding. They found a way to frame the situation, and therefore, it wasn't less painful, but at least like you had a way to think about it.
Yeah. That reframing, that's a good way of expressing it, I think.
Yeah, he just split the situation to be something about people in general, as opposed to like, he didn't make any judgments. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
He said, like, he didn't make it personal.
You didn't make it personal about them.
Yeah.
Which is
It's like humans are this way.
Humans are this way, right? They don't know you, and they're afraid, and so they act this way. Yeah. Interesting. All right, we're going to keep going. Thank you.
Wait, I have a question.
Oh, you have a question?
It's a more general question.
Okay.
So, like, how do you feel about the construction? Does this always happen on Friday?
It seems to be happening more and more on Fridays. I'm going to have to investigate this construction schedule in our neighborhood because it's really.
For the sake of your online.
Well, no, it's about you guys. It stresses me out, man. I don't know what's up with the lawn work.
I'm just afraid that they may not be hearing you.
Yeah. Well, let's continue reading. Here's another story from when Mary was 11 years old. She says, after paying the rent, light, water, and other bills, we had very little left over for food. Mother would tell me to buy a 5-pound sack of flour, a small can of baking powder, salt, and 2 cans of carnation milk for the baby. The 2 cans of milk had to last for 1 week. It was diluted with so much water that it didn't look like anything nourishing. Mother made tiny biscuits each morning and served 1 biscuit and a tin cup of water to each of us 3 times a day. During the time we lived in Colusa, this is California, we had no rice, meat, or anything beside biscuits to eat. Nonetheless, when we sat down to eat, Father would pray, thanking God for all our blessings. This used to irritate me. At the age of 11 years, I couldn't think of anything to be thankful for. Once he was sitting on the porch, smoking after dinner, and I asked him what we had to be so thankful for. And he said, "Don't you remember why we came here?" I had forgotten the fate of our family in Korea was much worse than ours. Nevertheless, my stomach ached for lack of food, and I had severe cramps. One evening the pain was so bad, I got up to fill myself with water, which helped somewhat. As I neared the kitchen, I saw Father and Mother sitting across from each other at the table, holding hands, with tears flowing down their faces. I realized then how much agony they were suffering, and that my own feelings were as nothing compared with theirs. I had been so absorbed in myself that the thought of my parents' suffering had never entered my mind. Seeing them that way made me realize how ignorant I was. It awakened me to the realities of life. So put yourself in Mary's shoes. You're 11 years old. How do you identify with her thoughts and feelings if you were little Mary? So just take her point of view for a little while and then flip it and take the father and maybe in the mother's point of view. How would you respond if you were Mary? How would you respond if you were the father? What do you notice about this story? Let's just take a couple minutes to talk about whatever's coming up. I'll be in your group. What did you notice?
I feel for both of them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, on the one hand, when you're younger, you don't know to realize. I feel like as you get older, your just subconscious grows because you're absorbing more information about everything. But when you're like 11 years old, like, you're just caught up in like you don't have like those experiences to contextualize everything that your parents are going through. So I understand.
Yeah, it's such a natural reaction. What about the father's point of view?
Did she leave when she was 5? Like she left Korea when she was 5?
Yeah, she left Korea when she was 5.
So then I guess like when you're that young, you're not gonna like you weren't alive as long as your parents were to like see how much suffering like their parents went through and like their upbringing.
Right.
Because there's a reason they left.
Yeah. And they left as things were getting bad. So when they were there, when she was tiny, things were really good. And now that they're in California, they're hearing these stories of family in Korea, who are being killed and suffering under Japanese aggression. So the father, of course, has that father's point of view. And she's this little kid. What do you think about the blessing, the food? I don't know. What does that do for him in terms of resilience? Let's sort of return to that theme.
Gratitude is great for resilience, but it's also just a good reminder of kind of like what he was saying before. Like he kind of said, I forgot the ways like my family had like suffered, and it's a good reminder. Like, things could be a lot worse than they are right now.
Well, let's continue. Unless, Sam, you want to add anything? Is there anything on your mind?
Nothing beyond what you were saying.
Okay, good. Let's tell another story.
Continues to combat her thoughts with just peace and greatness.
Another story. So Mary is in high school, and she says this: I started my second year of high school in Willows. The atmosphere in school was chilling. None of the students except one spoke to me, but my good luck was working for me again. The girl who sat across the aisle from me in several classes was very friendly and eager to talk to me. Her name was Margaret Finch. Strangely enough, although there were many Chinese, Japanese, and Koreans cultivating rice in Willows at that time, there were no Oriental students in the school. Remember, this is her word. She's using the term Oriental, which of course we don't use anymore. So I was an object of curiosity. During lunch and after school, Margaret always talked to me and we became friends. One day, she asked if I would like to go to church with her. She said she went to the Presbyterian church, which was not far from our house. I asked Father about it. He said, "Why not? Maybe times are changing." He told me to go and find out. He was always the optimist. I told Margaret I would meet her at church the following Sunday. Something told me to go early and find out what kind of person the minister was. So I took 3 of my brothers and started out. As we neared the church, we saw a man standing in the doorway, and this is the minister. As we were walking up the steps, he placed his arm across the door and said, "I don't want dirty Japs in my church." My reply was, "Would it make any difference if I told you we were not Japanese but Korean?" He said, "What the hell's the difference? You all look alike to me." He just glared at us with hatred in his eyes and told us to go to hell. So we came back home and told Father about it. He just shook his head and didn't say a word. And as it happened, Margaret Finch, her friend, came to church, and Mary, of course, had gone. And so Margaret was very irritated that her friend had stood her up. And so Mary told her the story of going early and what the minister had said. So Margaret went and told her father. Her father was a judge, a very upstanding, prominent citizen in the town. And they both said, "Please come back and visit the church again." And the next Sunday, it was a whole different story when Mary and her family arrived. But the minister clearly had revealed his true personality. So I think the question for this story that I'm asking is, we talk about faith and spirituality and spiritual practice as an opportunity to build resilience. But what do we see in this story about religion that damages and hinders resilience, and fosters hatred and fear? And what do you think is the difference between like good religion and bad religion? Or what are you noticing about this story? Talk amongst yourselves.
Sam, what do you think?
Clearly this minister is letting, like, his American idea of community inform his idea of the community of God.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's always super sad. We see that so often. I often have a hard time, like sometimes I get so frustrated with institutionalized churches because there's some things that you see that seem to be so clearly wrong. And then at the same time, I have trouble critiquing them because they are based on like thousands of years of tradition. And that's a lot of people who are far smarter than me saying what churches should be. So.
Yeah, but the institutionalized church, right? There's so many examples of this.
Right.
Right?
And so, like, clearly this is an instance where I can step in and say, like, this is clearly not what God had in mind. It's clearly a sinful use of power. But in terms of, like, what makes a good church and a bad church, I often wonder, like, who am I to set that? And yet, like, I do have very clear ideas. I would say that, like, churches that prevent anyone from seeking God and being that way.
So preventing people from seeking God would be in the bad church category. Yeah.
For me.
Where have you seen experience for yourself good church or even just good spirituality? Can you think of? Yeah.
Everything that I've experienced here at UVA.
Oh.
I haven't experienced anything really bad, actually. Yeah, I've been really lucky.
Yeah.
Now that I'm thinking about it.
Good.
But in this story, I was just kind of thinking about how, like, one day, like, every, like, nation, tribe, and tongue are, supposed to, like, bow down and worship our God. But this, like, minister is, like, just prejudiced and discriminatory. And the thing is, they're not even Japanese.
Right.
Like, I went back and I checked, and they left Korea.
Right. He's so ignorant. Yeah.
But I'm like, I guess I was a little bit confused in terms of the, like, what was going on historically. Like, you were saying, like, the Japanese had come to Korea.
Yes, but then there's conflict with. When would this have been? Like, it would still be early days. I mean, there were all these. There was still conflicts with, I guess, the United States and Asia and Japan in particular. Of course, Pearl Harbor later caused all kinds of, but that hadn't happened yet. But there were laws against Asians working, and there was no citizen, all that stuff. So I think there was just still this tension and legal racism, institutional racism was very real. And so he was very much in line with what everybody was saying and doing and acting. So, and I was thinking too, like during the civil rights movement in the American South, this happened, like this story happened over and over again, where people of color would go to intentionally to integrate a church, and the pastor would meet him at the door with the elders and block their way. So
I often wonder, like those people are Christian.
Yeah.
Somehow. I mean, God loves them, and they, like, will they be in heaven? Like, what does that look like? What does the redemption of racist people who are also Christian?
yeah, heaven. Right. Will we see this guy?
Yeah.
I mean,
The wild card about Christianity, right?
You're gonna see some interesting people in heaven. You're gonna be like,
Yeah, you
"They
should
get
not.
into heaven," and then you're gonna realize, well, Jesus Christ died for all of us,
Right.
and God loves all of us, and that sometimes feels absurd,
Yeah.
given stories like this, but it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So
too bad we don't get to keep this guy out, but
I know, but
right.
yeah.
All right, that's a good questions.
I don't know, maybe God's kindness leads us to repentance. So
God's kindness.
Maybe he enters heaven and is like, oh, this was completely wrong, and he has a heart.
Right. Well, that's the belief, right? God's kindness leads to repentance through all of it, through all of us. Yeah. How you doing over there? Good. So I found this passage in the book that I had not noticed before, and she tells the story of 1918, a certain pandemic. So as we read this, just kind of imagine, I think, you know, the Lee family living now somewhere, because we know that there are families like theirs in the world right now suffering under this pandemic. So she says, in the late summer of 1918, influenza came to the United States. Called the Spanish flu, it was said to have originated in Spain and spread all over Europe. Almost every family had someone ill, and there were many deaths. Father and several friends dug graves, and Father conducted the brief funeral services. The family across the road from us lost a member. Mother and I were with a woman who lived close by when she died. She asked us to take care of her daughter, who was 5 years old. We took the girl home with us. She slept with me for several weeks. Father helped with her mother's burial. Her father went to Stockton to find a place to live, came back for his daughter, and left Willows. It was a very sad time for all of us. My parents did not get the flu, but the rest of us were in bed. I was the only one in danger, however. I had a high fever and was unconscious most of the time for a month. One day, I awoke to complete darkness. I couldn't see at all. Father said he was going to get a doctor. I told him to get Dr. Walker, the one to whom I had been taking Korean women who were ill. Dr. Walker said I had severe malnutrition and that I should eat nourishing food such as milk, eggs, and orange juice. I laughed and said my family had never had such things in the house. He also said that my eyes needed a complete rest, that I was to stay out of school for a year at least, that 2 years would be even better, and I was not to read even a newspaper. That meant the end of my hopes for high school graduation or diploma. Can you imagine? But Mary was a resilient person, and in 1919 she got married. She got married to another Korean immigrant, and they got married in a Presbyterian church, and they rented this little shack. And I just want to read this because I think it's so, you really hear her voice here. She says, "We rented the house that the Lee family had lived in. It was an old building with no bathroom or bathtub. The toilet was built onto the house outside after the outhouses were removed. We didn't have a hot water tank, so we had to heat the bath water in buckets on the gas stove, and we used a large tin tub for baths. There were electric lights, however. The house had 4 small rooms, a kitchen, and a dining area. I felt rich with so many things for the first time in my life. I had my first experience with a toothbrush and toothpaste, which took some time to get used to." I just think, wow, she's saying like, I'm so rich. So rich. Well, I wanted to, in the few minutes we have left, I want to give you a little more of her story. So she and her husband had 2 boys, and her son Henry went to Georgetown University, and all the way from California, and he was elected student body president. He was the first person of color, first minority to in that role, and had a lot of friends. He was very, very popular, and he was invited by some of his friends to join the fraternity. And so he went to join, and in the meantime, they had read the charter of the fraternity, which banned non-white members. So the fraternity membership came to nothing. But apparently he appreciated the fact that he'd been invited. You know, it's just such an interesting dilemma, I think, for someone like that. He did his MA at Georgetown. He got a PhD from Penn, and then he worked for the Federal Reserve Bank. He worked for the State Department during the Vietnam War, traveled a lot back and forth. And the other son worked, I think, more sort of blue-collar jobs in California. So it's just interesting, again, to see this American dream, as we call it, playing out in their lives. And this next section kind of gives us a look at how Mary Paik Lee interprets her son's success. Okay, so this is reading number 6. She says, Henry's success reflects the sort of attitude change we had been hoping for since 1906, a change that took nearly 100 years to bring about. In 1942, after all the excitement and confusion of Pearl Harbor had faded somewhat, most of the American firms suddenly made it known that they would hire Orientals who were qualified to work in their establishments. We regarded that as a miracle from heaven, because it happened at a time when everything seemed hopeless for all of us. We gave thanks to God for bringing about this sudden change. It brought new hope to everyone that we might have a better future. I am always happy to see Orientals able to work almost everywhere now. So she's writing this as a 90-year-old lady. America is the only place in the world where people of all races can live in peace and harmony with one another. It is the responsibility of all persons to obey the laws of the country and do their part to maintain this harmony. As my mother always said, God is surely leading us in the right direction. So let's take just a couple minutes for you to talk together. How do you respond to this? And what are you thinking about when you hear her words? What do you think?
Her mother is not wrong. God is certainly leading us in the right direction. But America is the only place in the world where people of all races can live in peace and harmony. That just feels untrue right now. And maybe it'll be true, but I actually hope that America isn't the only place where that can be possible, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely thought along the same lines. There's little evidence for that reality as a reality. It seems more aspirational. Is there anything else about her story that you notice?
She's clearly a very faithful person that has so much to teach us. I feel like some of the saints we read, if you speak about God very tangibly in like every other sentence and talk about interacting with God emotionally and viscerally throughout their day-to-day life, and she doesn't do that. God kind of enters through her family and through church and like through her reflections on her mother, and there's less of like a personal experience of God. Which I think is interesting because she has a really difficult life. So I wonder what her personal experience of God looks like, or if that's even something that she would conceive of.
That's such an interesting question, right? What was her personal experience of God? You know, I'm wondering too, right? She points to her family, to this collective community faith. And you know, you see throughout her story, like she's irritated because her father's praying, and she's so mad at the minister, and you know, so the emotions are there. But well, how did she actually experience God?
Right.
Yeah, it's really not on the page, is it? Yeah. Well, I'm going to ring the bell. And so this smoky, you can put another log on there. I don't know if that helps it be, or you just move around. Keeps the mosquitoes away. Well, our time is ending now, but so I'd like to just read a couple of final words from Mary Pike Lee. And I really hope that that her words and her experience will, give you something to think about, and maybe reflect on what you see in the world, like how you might act in the world on behalf of people like her, because I don't think in many ways that we are a lot like her, at least in terms of our economic and personal circumstances. But also wonder like what we can learn from her. Clearly she's a survivor to live to 95 after all this just physical hardship. But even from her spiritual point of view, Sam was saying we don't see a lot about her individual experience of God. She's appealing to what her parents taught her and what she kind of learned in the community. So she sort of has this communal, it's almost like the community is carrying her faith. Anyway, it's brought up a lot of questions for us. And I hope that you guys had good conversations too. And yeah, we did discuss her concept of America. It's an interesting one, I think. Aspirational for sure. So at the age of 90, she looks back and she is reflecting on her parents. And she says this: "My parents came to America with high hopes for a better way of life. Mother said they had expected life to be difficult, not knowing the language, without money, but they had put their faith in God and they were determined to survive whatever hardships came their way. Their faith was their only comfort and refuge throughout their lives." And then she says, "The fourth generation of young Koreans growing in comfortable homes with every advantage open to them will find it difficult to realize the sacrifices made by the first generation. It's very gratifying to me to see the progress our family has made from poverty to where we are today. It's nothing spectacular, but a good, firm foundation has been laid on which our future generations will find it easier to build their dreams." So may it be so. So may the Lord Christ go with you wherever he may send you. May he protect you through the wilderness and guide you through the storm. May he bring you home rejoicing at the wonders he has shown you. May he bring you home rejoicing once again to our doors. Amen. Thanks for coming.